Hello and welcome to another Thursday, another edition of the Gwentlemen Talk Show. As always, I am Dale the White Wolf, joined with Swim. Today we have Vishra and our very special guest, Lifecoach. Lifecoach, thank you very much for agreeing to do this with us. I know it's late for you, and I know you're staying up to be here with us, but thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely. I also enjoy being able to join. Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
But no, so we've had a pretty fun week, I'd say, as far as so full caveat, full disclosure, I have not gotten a chance to play since the hotfix, but I hear it was pretty darn good.
I've been enjoying it so far. I played more Gwent the last 24 hours than I have in the last 3 weeks. Although part of that's from moving, but still, it's actually really fun so far.
So what's your...
it's
awesome.
pretty diverse.
I'm curious, Lifecoach, what's your favorite part of the hotfix so far? What's really jumping out to you?
I guess weather definitely needed some fix, and it definitely received that fix. So I'm actually pretty happy what they did with weather. At least that they basically removed a little bit of the strength. So that's pretty cool.
And Swim, what about you?
Yeah,
I'm seeing dwarfs back, which has me concerned.
Yeah, you know, I'm liking it. I'm enjoying it. It feels much more balanced right now. It feels like all of the factions have basically a stay in, and of course that's to be expected with like new patches, just because things aren't solved yet. But it's feeling good. And like Lifecoach said, the weather was definitely something that they needed to address.
I need to thank you for the dwarf deck, by the way. It's so easy. It's fun to beat with Nilfgaard.
Yeah, no, Nilfgaard. if the Nilfgaard deck is teched against it properly, that will be an unfavorable matchup.
But no, I've really enjoyed the patch so far. There's a lot of diversity. I think I've seen a pretty even spread across the decks. It's gone up a bit with Scoia'tael, and I know I saw a lot right away with people trying different decks, but so far it's been a really nice spread, and nothing seems blatantly overpowered. I was worried about Nilfgaard or Northern Homes beforehand, but they did a couple nerfs immediately that kind of curbed what I was worried about. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of days, actually, and what people come up with.
No, it should be a lot of fun. But while we've got you here, Lifecoach, while you're still fully awake, let's jump into some Q&A if you don't mind. So really, back in 2016, let's go back to whenever we were still in closed beta, whenever we were just going from alpha to closed to public. But along the way, it's one of the things that really got emphasized with the game was that it's a really, it's about gameplay, it's about deck building, it's about skill level and consistency. And it's kind of known that that's kind of what drew you into Gwent in the first place. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the things that I think any card game player is like, man, this is what I look for. I want to be able to have what I'm doing matter. Do you feel like Gwent is still doing well in that regard? Do you think it is still consistently rewarding at a competitive level?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess they are consistently doing positive changes as well for the casual population of players, as well for the competitive area. And I guess the ladder changes which we have been able to witness recently, not the very recently, but the ladder changes we have witnessed coming up 2 or 3 weeks ago were basically completely emphasizing that. Yeah, so that was definitely a very big positive change, at least for the competitive population. And yeah, I guess they are basically releasing consecutively, actually every month, something which is extremely positive for the one or the other player group. So that's definitely progressing.
Well, with that in mind, what do you think is the most important thing for CDPR to focus on going forward? What really should be what needs to be done to maintain that balance?
Yeah, I guess there are many ideas. I mean, some ideas are that you make it able that competitive players can make a living out of this, so can sustain themselves. And I'm not talking about sustaining through streaming, but really sustaining through playing strengths and then being able to participate in tournaments. So that's one possibility, and I think they're actually working on quite hard on that, or at least in the direction that people who love the game and are extremely enthusiastic about it will be able to make a living out of it. So that's one thing. Another thing will be the ladder. So in my opinion, ladder which goes in the competitive area should be built so that you can basically also practice your tournament practice on the ladder, and that would emphasize maybe a different faction system, but also definitely also low K values. Going into this direction, maybe even a separate ladder system for the very competitive area where you might join in if something else happens or whatever that might be. Something in this regard could be the one way or the other. So that's probably another point. And I guess the third point would be the balancing. And the balancing regarding rather the top level of players. But that again, I mean, if you have, for example, a different faction system, that might also be redundant, kind of, because if you have something like this, you also don't have to deliver a perfect balance through the factions. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I'm still following you.
Now, I know that some games, like if you take Hearthstone, for example, their competitive scene is largely based off of the ladder finishes. So you get points off of where you finish on the ladder for the season, and at the end of the season, if each of the seasons, there's a tournament qualifier that feeds into the end of the year qualifier. Counterpoint to that, games like Magic that are paper card games have tournaments called Grand Prix where anyone can go and play, and then the top X amount of players will get invites to the professional tournaments. Do you think that do you prefer the ladder tournament for Gwent? Do you think it's better to stick with the ladder system that rewards people who might be able to grind more necessarily, or is something like what other games can do where anyone can enter and then those with the highest skill level have the chance to win, or someone can then go and spike the tournament? Which do you think is better for tournament play for Gwent?
Oh, I think you need to take the best of both worlds. Yeah, I definitely. I mean, you were talking about the basically online or offline, and I think the way how you collect the most sample size is simply online. Yeah, so obviously I love to see that you can basically display your skill online and therefore to qualify for other stuff. But for that, you need obviously a system which is, I mean, you talked about grinding, and that's exactly not how it should be, right? You shouldn't be rewarded for grinding. You should be rewarded for your skill, yeah? And obviously you will need to play some games in order to display your skill. I mean, you cannot just come there and say, hey, I'm a very good player, now reward me. I mean, it's obviously not possible, but having like a scale, which is, I mean, you can probably build it up that you need whatever to grind 200, 300 games per month, and then you don't get rewarded more for grinding more. Whereas at the moment, it's rather like if you play 500 games, you have with a certain skill level, you have a specific MMR. If you play twice that many games, well, you're just higher in the MMR. So it basically doesn't stop getting rewarded for the hard grind. And that's you also talked about Hearthstone. I mean, that's what is very prevalent in Hearthstone, and that is also how it shouldn't be, obviously, right? So I think while you can expect from a pro player or from a player who wants to make a living out of it, to play a specific amount of games or some amount of games, you should not encourage quantity over quality.
Mm. No. And it's funny you mentioned Hearthstone in this, because I'm just curious more from so you went more of the process, I guess, that you went through going from Hearthstone to Gwent, because I mean that caused a bit of a stir, I think, from people just being like, oh hey. So you know when you tried out Gwent initially, what was drawing you to Gwent over Hearthstone? Like, just walk me through the process if you could.
Yeah, I simply think that Gwent has an insanely high skill cap. Yeah, so I mean, even nowadays, I mean, if you just take a look at the top 10 of the global ladder, you will realize that many of those players are still making grave mistakes, major mistakes, and game-losing mistakes. And not only, let's say, once in 100 games, but rather like nearly in every game. Yeah. So, simply, I mean, if you just take a look at that, you already might realize how high the skill level of Gwent actually is. Because if you switch that, for example, to other games, let's take Hearthstone. I mean, you can also, of course, say it's now more developed, but I mean, you nearly don't see like major mistakes in the competitive area there usually. Yeah. So it just, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not even Hearthstone. Maybe it's just that I've played Hearthstone too many years. Who knows? Yeah, I mean, somebody who's new in both games might judge that better. But for me, Gwent was just way more appealing in the competitive area. Yeah, but that's obviously a subjective view.
Although I think,
I mean, the deck building in this game is one of the biggest draws as well. I mean, you have so much more control, and just the fact that you draw out so much of your hand right to start, so that you can, design your deck around a more precise strategy, just allows like a larger breadth of strategies. It's pretty great.
I don't even know about that. Like,
awesome.
one of the big things to me is that like there's no the optimal lines in a lot of Hearthstone games are pretty much predetermined, like your optimal route through the game. There's very few paths that you can choose throughout a lot of it. A lot of it's basically you build your deck beforehand, and then it's relying almost entirely on your draws, your mana curve, etc. Whereas Gwent, you have different lines you can take on every single turn of the game. You have multiple lines, and a single point on it can be something that'll lose you a game, and it's something that you have to always be cognizant of. But it's like you said, it's a much higher skill cap overall, and that's a big part of it, I think, is that instead of having like one line of play, maybe 2 or 3 tops, Gwent has 10, 20, 30 available to it at any given time. It's both great and awful because it makes it much harder as a professional player, like as a high-end player, to actually be able to optimize your play skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it. We're going, well, not even funny, obviously much more of a competitive scene, but speaking of the competitive scene, we'll fix it in editing.
Segue!
But let's talk about, so we have had some community-run tournaments going on for the duration of the closed beta. But then whenever just before we did the transition to open beta, we had the first official Gwent Challenger, which, I hear you did pretty well in. So... if you could just talk to us about that maybe a little bit. What were you... what was your favorite aspects of it? What are you hoping to see more from these types of tournaments? Like, just walk us through what your experience was with Gwent Challenger.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty awesome. Yeah, it's a tournament where you can prepare for. And I prepared myself a lot for this Gwent Challenger, over a month of intense gameplay. And built my lineup. Obviously, the classes I faced weren't those classes. For people who watched it, I have talked about it, that I basically hated on Henselt, but it seemed that, or it appeared that my opponents just didn't play Henselt at all for whatever reason. So this tactic didn't really come into appearance, but I think because of all this practice beforehand, I also kind of knew about the matchups a little bit, and also about the game plan of those. And I really think it was just about performing what I learned the month before on this very specific day. And I guess in this case I was also lucky, and at the same time, so could decide the entire thing. But which is also, of course, it makes me very happy, because it's like a once in a year chance this year. So very happy that my luck didn't break at this specific day.
Yeah, how do you feel about the format and the organization? Because you're a big tournament player in Hearthstone so how do you feel about the format of the event? Do you think it could have used improvements?
Well, it's always the same, right? If you the more you play, the more skill heavier it becomes, right? Which means you have a best of 3 would be probably very shortcut, so best of 5 is cool. Usually I would say best of 7 might even be better, but because Gwent games are, let's say, quite long from their, simply because you have way more decision making and also harder decision making, probably it wouldn't be that appealing for the watchers to also watch a best of 7, right? So you probably have to cut a little bit there, so the best of 5 is perfectly fine. And I think knockout is a little bit too harsh, I guess, from a skill perspective of view, because you can always just run unlucky in one best of 5 and then you're just out, right? And but I also don't see like a very appealing alternative, because the nearest alternative would be group stages, but group stages are again not that great for the watcher population.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to say. I would say group stages are better for competitive players or for the competitive players, but probably for the watchers or for the broad audience, it's probably better to have a knockout system. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with tournaments, it's always you usually have to just choose between whether you want, you know, the player competitor experience or the viewer experience. It's
but I think they actually hit a good line there. So I think they're trying hard, also improving there. And overall, I mean, for that being the first big tournament, I think CDPR made a really good job.
And you know why we're asking is because whenever we try and get free tournament formatting advice, because we have our own tournament that we run, which if for anyone interested is the Gwentlemen's Open. It is this coming up weekend. Yes. So you still have time to sign up if you are so inclined. I believe there's still slots available. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're interested, Gwentlemen's Open is going to be this weekend, the 8th and the 9th. And it's a good opportunity to get your feet wet with the tournament scene, get into it, and see how far you can go. It's a 2-day event. Day 2 are qualifier, or day 1's qualifiers to get into day 2, and then we'll do the cast. Do we have a time on that yet? Swim, do you know?
We don't have 100% confirmation, although we usually do them Mondays.
Yeah, I mean,
the TGO this week should actually be pretty exciting. I mean, when there's a tournament like right after a patch, on one hand it can be kind of jarring because of course players don't have time to prepare, but on the other hand it still is at the very least very exciting just to see what ends up being played and see what ends up being very good.
Yeah, they're always my favorite, honestly. I prefer new formats that aren't quite as solved. I think it gives you a lot more. It gives you an edge as a deck builder, and I personally enjoy doing things like that. If you can find the things that people are going to copy, like your dwarf deck, you can get it. Well, it's a thing like there's certain decks whenever a patch comes out that everyone immediately kind of drifts to. We saw it with Skellige last patch, with Nilfgaard before that. In the closed beta meta, we saw it repeatedly with certain factions, where a patch comes out and everyone sees there's these 2 or 3 decks. At the beginning of open beta, actually, all thought it was Queensguard, right? And then 2 days later, Queensguard was nowhere to be seen. So it's always nice to be able to, as a deck builder, be able to build for those specific decks in mind and then bring a unique lineup that people don't know about yet. Yeah.
So what do you guys specifically with this hotfix that this new let's call it a patch that we find ourselves in, it's obviously changed a bunch of things. What do you guys feel about kind of the meta state? Which factions or archetypes are we thinking are going to be powerful? Which ones do we like that they got buffed? What do you guys think? Vishra.
I'm really happy Northern Realms isn't as stupidly powerful as I thought it was going to be. Looking at the patch notes after the dev update, I had thought that faction was going to be a clear-cut number 1 with the buffs that they received. The changes were actually pretty good, I think, and left them balanced right now. I think the early frontrunner is going to be your dwarf deck, just for a couple of days, just off of people playing it immediately. And if you're not packing some kind of heavy removal, which people don't tend to do during a new patch, it's very strong against non-removal decks. I think Monsters is still really good. I think every faction is pretty good. I think Skellige might take a little bit of time, though, to find a deck. I think a lot of the mainstays for it that we've seen the last couple patches are gone, but the faction always seems to bounce back very well, and it's always a different version of the deck in the faction. It's probably the most unique faction over from patch to patch, what deck is good in the faction. But otherwise, I think every faction should do something competitive at least.
What do you think, Lifecoach?
Yeah, I think pretty much the same. I think a lot of factions gain some, but definitely with less weather, you can probably do something with every faction. There are also some overpowered mechanics lurking if they are not restricted by weather. So that's, Dwarves, for example, that's a good example, right? So there are some powerhouse combinations, and if you do it right, you might, depending on also the amount of removal in the meta, Dwarves might sometimes suddenly get a power cut. Because that's pretty much the only thing which basically blocks them, right? So having, for example, high minion removal And if for whatever reason suddenly every deck is, instead of running, let's say, 2 or 3 ways to handle high minion removal, only one, you can try to carry your super dwarf over 2 turns, for example. Yeah, so those are possibilities. Or maybe consume monsters the same, right? So consume monsters were getting off. I mean, specifically the bear was pretty oppressive, right? So there was the bear, and because of the bear, you could not really play your consume X with a harpy. I'm not talking about the normal harpy, but the
harpy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just that the X are representing another 10x, 10 stats, sorry. That's pretty awesome, right? So you play 3 harpies, and if 2 goes through, you suddenly create a surplus of 20 stats, and that's just pretty bonkers. It's really awesome. So, yeah. I mean, actually, we are trying that out at the very moment, this consume monster thing. Despite them actually got, they actually got worse stat-wise. They actually received like 3 they now have 3 or 4 stats less. But yeah, it's just about the meta, right? And if the meta shifts in a specific way, I guess consume monsters might be very powerful.
Yeah, one of the big things that Weather did, sorry, Swim, to cut you off, but one of the big things that Weather did that we saw it from closed beta to open beta is that decks didn't get to really go wide anymore. Like, Weather severely hinged decks from spreading out across the board, going big units. Arrakis Behemoth just disappeared overnight between the nerfs and Weather. But hopefully that means, like, Dwarves is a deck that goes wide, Consume goes wide. They're decks that couldn't exist the last patch, so hopefully we can see them now with no Weather.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say exactly the same thing. I mean, we're seeing Consume come on strong just because Arakises were so incredibly vulnerable. I mean, probably the most vulnerable like strategy or unit in the entire game to just all 3 weather forms, and it's much more liberating. Well, maybe not so much fog. Yeah, I mean, I'm basically thinking the same thing. I honestly think Skellige's a little bit underrated at the moment. I feel like they will start to get a little more attention and a little more love. People will start emerging with better decks there as we move forward. Dale, I know you were saying you hadn't gotten much of a chance to play it, but do you have any impressions?
I'm probably going to get a little bit of hate for this, but I am genuinely happy to see a Scoia'tael deck again. Because, I mean, they were everywhere all the time, and then open beta hits and it's just like, no, nothing. You try and make a couple of decks here and there, but there was just nothing that stood out. And now it's just like, oh, hope! We have Scoia'tael again. And I realize that there's going to be people who remember, and they're just going to be like, nah, I don't like this guy.
Too soon. I still need more time.
No, I'll be trying that out for sure. But other than that, it just looks like, as you said before, Skellige, no matter what you do to that faction, something else pops out of it. So I don't think we're going to be seeing the same decks, but we're still going to be seeing something, because it's constant. There's always something in Skellige that makes it stand out. So I'm looking forward to getting a chance to play around with both those for sure.
Yeah, but absolutely.
I know we talked about a lot of the weather stuff that happened. I mean, all right, so the patch before this hotfix was the weather update. Is this the weather update 2.0? I guess the finishing of the weather update, like, oh yeah, this was supposed to be in that last one.
It's not. Something tells me they're not finished yet, Dale.
Weather 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Weather is something that, for anyone who wasn't playing in the closed beta, weather historically has gone through so many iterations of like little tweaks to bigger tweaks, but it's gone through a lot of changes, and I feel like we are getting closer, but at the same time, something tells me it's not done yet.
I mean, okay, so Swim, you think that we're getting a little bit closer. Lifecoach, do you think we're going in the right direction with weather?
Yeah, I mean, my suggestion was that, what I always hated about the weather, that you cannot really interact with it. So that you basically get punished immediately. And then if you have the answer, you still receive the punishment, right? So I would have liked to see something which hits at the end of the turn or something like this. So if you become weathered and you have the weather clear, you don't get punished. But if you didn't have the weather clear, you just still take the same amount of damage, right? So basically, if you didn't have the weather clear, nothing changed. But if you had the weather clear, instead of getting punished, you completely don't get punished. And I think that would have also been fair, even without changes or something. You would have not even need to nerf it then. But I guess In this case, they just said, okay, we make weather just weaker. Yeah, but I still don't like that you play weather and you immediately receive a benefit, right? It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, you mean that it ticks immediately?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think that now that they've changed it to a point where it's not borderline oppressive, you can actually start to do some really interesting things with it. For example, I know that someone had been batting around an idea the day that I saw on Reddit that I really liked was a card, whether it was like a silver unit or something like that when you played it, you could play it on any row and then it would bounce a weather from your side to your opponent's side.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of like cool little interactions that you can do now that weather isn't a thing that if it's too powerful will stop people from playing the game and stop decks from existing. Like that ability to be oppressive to a meta is something that weather's always kind of dabbled right on the very edge with. We saw it in closed beta with all the weathers. They were just straight up, if you have last play, you probably win the game. To open beta where it's kind of toned the power level down, and now he might be to a point where it might be a little bit too weak, but it might be better for the game that's a little bit too weak and sees play only attached to units maybe instead of just straight up spells. They can do a lot more with the cards now.
Yeah, and they can push weather synergies basically wherever they want. Like you said, it's basically more attached to cards right now. It doesn't have as much standalone value, but at the same time, they can still incentivize it with cards like R2's Adept, Hound, Foglet. It doesn't even have to be cards that call weather directly, but even stuff like Foglet that they can push for in the future. So yeah, I honestly love the spot it's in right now. Actually, I'm very happy with where it's at.
I will say I dislike that I can't play Spellitel anymore. I actually really enjoyed that deck. It doesn't exist really, I don't think, anymore without the weather changes, so I'm a little bit disappointed there.
The weather changes overall, I think, are continuing. As Swim already said, we're not done changing weather. So
not by a long shot.
No, but I look back on where we were before, and yeah, I'd say it's an improvement, even from where we were just at in open beta, and prior to that where we were at in closed beta. So gradually, I feel getting there with weather, and I don't know. I want to see more fun weather effects. Like I want to see weather do something other than just, oh, hey, it's on the board, you're getting damaged. Like that'd be kind of neat.
Yeah,
it's definitely
that'd
design
be
space.
really interesting.
It's a design space I think they want to work more with, but again, if it's too high on the power curve, it just takes over everything. So we'll see. Yeah. I'd like to see positive weather effects at some point. I think it's a really cool way to go. But again, that's one that if you make it anywhere even remotely too strong, it is undeal. Like you can't do anything to it then. Yep. Like it's just too much. So we'll see what they do with it going forward. But I think at this point they can start to experiment a little bit and not worry about just breaking the game.
Well, I mean, before weather's identity for a long time was basically treating all units on the row equally, right? Whether it was just setting them to the same strength or hitting units at a certain amount, but it didn't have a limit, right? And we're seeing them now imposing a limit, right? It only hits one unit, and the fact that they're comfortable doing that and going in that direction, and presumably buffed weathers would have the same idea, makes me really warming up to the idea of buff weathers. I mean, the problem with buff weathers, and the things that always kind of concern to me about them is if they have no upper bound, if they can just like hit all of your units or something like that, then that would definitely represent problems going forward. That would be too strong.
All units on the row get +1. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is not going to be broken.
Eric is everywhere.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. So I agree. I agree, Vishra. I would actually like to see some kind of positive weathers. That would be pretty interesting.
So this hotfix did touch on a lot of stuff. So don't get me wrong, they definitely hit a lot. But I'm wondering, is there anything that you guys think they missed? Like what should have gotten either changed positively or negatively and didn't? Vishra, I'll start off with you. What are your thoughts on it?
Karanthar's probably still too strong. That's probably one that I think they missed that might need a point or two taken off of it. We'll see. I just think that the effect on a 9-point gold body is a very strong thing. Mist, I think that posts. I think Nilfgaard could have seen actually a couple more points back. I still don't like the Rainfarn and Kahir nerfs. I don't like Kahir, especially with the Calvite nerf of no longer pulling golds. I think that Kahir is in a very awkward spot now for most of the decks within that faction and weird interactions with all the leaders. He's too low of a strength to be used in some of the decks, and his effect got massively hit off of the Calvite nerf, so I would have liked to have seen maybe like a point or two back to him, a point or two back to Rainfarn, and just like a little bit of a rebalancing with those points. And also, yeah, as Strat mentioned, once again, Vadbjorn, another patch where Vadbjorn will see no play.
Yeah.
What do you think?
In terms of what's missed, it's a little early for me to say. Off the top of my head, Donar still doing what he does is it's a little bit more RNG and in a more frustrating way than I guess I'd like to see in the game. That's the first thing off the top of my head. I don't. I'll have many more answers as we go into the next week, but it's a little early to say, I think.
What do you think of Lifecoach? What got missed in this hotfix?
I don't know. I think it's kind of fine. I think some things got overnerfed, maybe a little bit too much. I don't like. I don't know, like the trebuchet, for example. I don't know. I mean, going from 3 to 4 damage, like armor piercing on the entire row to 1 damage, maybe 2 non-armor piercing on 3 targets. It feels a little bit weird, right? Because it's not only about like taking a look at the cards and from a pure stat point of view, or I mean they changed something, but it's also about identity of cards, right? So if you played with a trebuchet, okay, it came from something else, but let's say in the last iteration it was like a thing, it's a trebuchet, and it shoots, and then it delivers a deadly blow on the entire row, 4 damage, armor piercing, everything is done. So that's pretty cool, right? And then I mean I don't know, but it's better than lacerate, right? And suddenly this trebuchet should only throw what, like little stones. I mean, it's if it's really necessary, okay, sure, changes has to be done. But I don't think, for example, in this instance, it was necessary because trebuchet didn't even see play beforehand. Okay, I mean, maybe sometimes there's the argument that it might widen the design space and stuff like this, right? So, for example, getting rid of these row piercing effects or which the AoE row effects, which I don't even know whether that's even clever. Honestly, I don't think I don't even think so. But I think if you take away the identity from cards, you should be really sure before you do such things. Yeah. So we also saw some of these examples when they, for example, interchanged the hero abilities of Nilfgaard. So I mean, I think they've swapped 2 hero abilities. So those things were also kind of weird because not really necessary, but completely changing the identity. Yeah.
One I forgot, by the way. One I forgot also, it didn't change its identity like you were saying, but one that I just remembered is I really don't like what happened to Villain Tret and Mirth.
No.
I think that actually, in a way, does change its identity. Actually, thinking about it now, like, you've made it significantly different. I think a big part of that card was not just from a flavor perspective, but from a play perspective, its identity has changed a lot because it used to be something that would just completely hose certain strategies if you played it correctly, but it still gave you plenty of time to play around it. And now that effect doesn't actually work the way it used to. It doesn't really punish you for going tall with units because it's only 1 Scorch effect. It's basically like a glorified Shiryu in neutral, which in some ways is good, but it no longer does what it once did, and I think that's actually something I'm not really a fan of when I think about it now.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, you're right. I think it does really have to do with identity. The card definitely. I honestly don't think the new Villain Tret and Mirth is really bad. I think a lot of people are kind of overreacting to nerf. But that being said, I do agree that it did lose that identity. It feels different, and in a way that is obviously less tactical. I do understand why they did it. It was probably. I mean, when you're. I can imagine it was causing problems for the new player experience for sure, but I do miss the card personally.
Here's the thing though, is like as a card it works a lot like if you remember when Geralt Ard first came out, back when weather just set everything to 1, and the play back then was that you would weather a row down to 1, then you'd push everything into it because Guard could push the entire row at the time. So that was a card that, like, when I first started playing, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, I got completely destroyed the first time I saw it. But it's something that once you see it, once you learn how to play around it as a player. And Bork is much in that same vein. I've always thought it was a card that the first time you see it, you will absolutely get dominated by it. But once you learn the meta and what the card does, you start to learn how to play around the card. You can push people hard in round 1 or round 2, force it out early. You can play around it through just strength manipulation yourself. There's a lot of ways to deal with it. And I feel like it's one of those cards that you've removed its identity now, and it wasn't necessary because new players will learn how to deal with those types of cards. Not inherently oppressive in the way it's something like Becker's Twisted Mirror is. I needed my weekly plug on that card, by the way.
Did you got Twisted Mirror Vishra?
I have a supreme hatred for that card design, and it's the only card in Gwent that I would just remove from the game completely in its current form. I've gone on rants before, I think on the talk show, actually. I really have a dislike of that card. I dislike things that you can't play around or interact with because you never have a way to actually deal with that card. Something like Bork you can interact with. Something with Shearer even, you get like knowledge of it now. But BTM holds a special place of hatred in my heart.
I was playing Dwarfs last night, and they played a Harpy, and I used Thunderbolt pushing on the eggs. What do you mean you countered BTM, man?
Oh yeah, you just gave your opponent 24 points effectively to counter Becker's. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah, it works.
I mean, if the Becker's was going to be 25, you came out ahead.
I don't like it.
All right, well, here we go. I like asking this of people, actually. It's an easy question for you, Lifecoach. Favorite premium artwork in the game right now?
Bork.
That was easy.
Yeah,
I think it's the quickest response we've gotten on that question yet.
But actually, all the dragons, like here, what is the 6-head dragon? Guys, help me.
Lockfist?
Yes, this is also super amazing.
I wish Bork had a different animation. When he blew stuff up than just the Scorch effect. I wish he had more like a Hjalmar type thing where just like the board just lights up and everything that matches art.
Yeah. What do you think, Vishra? What's your premium of choice?
I've already gone on record as saying it's Yavin, just because you can shuffle back and forth with him and have the shove infinitely.
Yavin's so good.
Other than that, probably Caretaker.
Oh, ooh, yeah. Caretaker. Yeah, oldie but goodie. Yeah, for me, it's between two. It's between Vess and Fringilla.
Of course.
Yes, yeah, okay, sure. Good ones,
no, well, I don't know. They're really dynamic. I don't know.
Dynamic, engrossing. See, I feel like you'd be more of a Vest than a Necky kind of guy, Swim.
Yeah, that's.
Speaking of, I probably Tibor with his magic lance and all.
The lance that has no handle.
Oh, it has a handle. He has a handle.
Did they add? I thought he was like
just
using it with the premium art.
No, there's just a gap. He's holding the handle, and the lance is just like, I'm supposed to be here. But speaking of the characters, speaking of the lore a bit, I don't know how much of the Witcher series you've really gotten into, Lifecoach, but is there any card that in any character that you know of from the series that you'd really like to see on a card?
I mean, they already basically pushed a lot of characters, right? I mean, most of them. So I don't know.
No, I don't know if it's been most of them, because every time I try and talk with any, because I'm personally, I don't know much about the Witcher series. I'm trying to expand my knowledge, but every time I talk to people about it, like, oh, is this going on a card? I'm like, I don't know who that is. So no. Because I don't think they're going to be running out of ideas anytime soon. At least I hope not. Because that'd be like odd to start seeing some named cards that don't really, or unnamed cards, I guess. I don't know.
Well, they've already told us that they're willing, that they're going to make their own lore and stuff with Gwent, that they're going to expand the universe through Gwent, as well as, since the Witcher games, presumably at this point, are done with at least Geralt's arc, that they're going to expand it their own way. So we know that I think Gravez has gone on record saying that when he was on the talk show a couple weeks ago, that they'll go ahead and make their own stuff. Personally, there's a character called Nivellin from the first book that is really cool, and he has a really cool story actually that I'd really like to see a card with. And there's a character called Shrike that's like a really big deal in Geralt's history of like where he comes from that I'd like to see from the books. Also Uma, because Uma's character in the game is hilarious.
Yeah, Nivellin's a big talking bear, right?
He's not a bear. He's a guy who's under a curse. He's more like a werewolf, I think. But he's like this giant guy, and like, go read the stories from. It's literally the first story in the very first Witcher book. I know that you might be a little bit illiterate. Just go ahead and get the audiobook. I'll send it to you later.
No, I can read. Just like, you know, I mean, some of the words might be a little big for me.
Hold up, now I'm gonna try and out-lore somebody who probably knows more about the lore than I do. But you said first story in the first Witcher book?
It's chronological. It's in the Last Wish. I'm pretty sure it's the very first story is the one with Nivellin in it.
Oh, because the first short story that I remember from the book, I don't remember what book I was reading, was the
oh no, chat says I'm wrong. It's a second. Yeah, it's a second story. According to chat. Okay.
Hey, I was gonna say I have read some, so I could be like, yes, knowledge of stuff. But no, Lifecoach, going back to you streaming. So you've been doing a lot of Twitch streaming of Gwent, and with Super JJ as well, doing that co-op streaming. Are there any other big streamers that you'd like to see make that jump? Like, I mean, you went from Hearthstone to Gwent. Is there anybody else who you're just like, come on, guys, over here, it's better, it's better?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm inviting everybody. Of course. Yeah, sure.
Is there any player that you think would transition well from Hearthstone or another game into Gwent who doesn't play it currently? Like someone you think like it would really fit their skill style or their play style to play Gwent?
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are like the tryhards in Hearthstone never really made big appearance because now, I mean, honestly, I mean, Hearthstone is just, I mean, from the luck component, it's just heavier, and which basically means even if you were a quite skillful player in Hearthstone, it didn't mean that you made your appearance within 2 years. Yeah, because if you had a little bit of a downswing within these 2 years, you went to, let's say, 5-6 dream hacks. You busted all of these 5-6 dream hacks. You might be a very good player. Nobody ever heard of you, and I think that it's just different in Gwent. Yeah, so it's also the very strong Hearthstone players who are transitioning to Gwent. They are usually confirming top 100 spots, usually quite quickly, which also means that yeah, basically that. Yeah, if you have a certain skill level, you don't need as much luck in Gwent to confirm your skill level.
So going on, continuing with a community kind of idea. So Gwent's community, I think any community, especially with gaming, tends to get pretty vocal about certain topics. They kind of like want to talk about one thing for a while.
Bears.
All the bear talk.
Oh man, but is there anything with the Gwent community that stands out to you as different from any other communities that you've seen?
Okay. Does it to you?
Oh, for me, it's always. I think it might have just been the fact that I got in during the closed beta and there wasn't a lot of people, but it's always felt very inclusive to me. Because it's always been people willing to help each other out, and that's not something that you get a chance to see all that much of, unfortunately, these days. And I'm hoping that, even as we get larger, we can keep that community feel going.
Yeah, I have the feeling that it's more, basically what you said, like more helping each other out, but also kind of more constructive in the way of how interaction goes. But I was always wondering whether this might come down to the difference of age Gwent players are playing, because, I mean, it's just a feeling, but I have the feeling that Gwent players are just older than comparable players from other games. So I don't know whether there have been already some research on this topic, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean Hearthstone felt like a kind of a mixed bag in terms of age, because you've got a lot of I feel like Hearthstone had a lot of more of the younger crowd, and then maybe more of the older crowd, but not a lot in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
What about you?
I will say one thing that I.
You already going?
Oh no, I was actually going to go ahead and answer, but okay, Dale. One thing that I really like about our community that I spent a lot of time in the Hearthstone community, actually, like Lifecoach did, and one thing that I think that we do at this point at least better is that overall our metas at the top end and within the game seem to shift at a much more rapid pace than what the high end of Hearthstone does. You'll usually see for the tournament meta, generally it'll settle in Hearthstone after about 2 to 3 weeks, and then you're basically set with very minor variations within the decks up until the next set's released. There's very little innovation at the top end. It's very much optimizing for specific matchups and then going to tournaments and then optimizing your tournament lineup. In Gwent, we see a lot more where we'll see people experiment wildly across each faction and have completely different archetypes within those factions, and we'll see the ladder change at the start of the meta. It's every day, but once we're developed into a meta, like even last meta with the Skellige overlords that we had, we were still seeing a lot of effective answers popping up within a week after that deck's rise. So I really like how much this community puts into the deck building aspect and just working through the meta, not having it, I don't know if necessarily solved, but we work a bit more towards doing that type of a thing, and I like that a lot.
Yeah. I do personally feel in the context of this question, I feel as if Gwent the Gwent community can get a little bandwagony at times compared to the others. And I mean, while I don't disagree with what you guys are saying, what
Mr. Dwarfs himself.
Yeah, no, that's exactly my point. I feel like there's a kind of disproportionate amount of net decking in this game, honestly, from compared to what I've seen about other games. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just come from like not playing enough like card games. But I feel like people kind of like bandwagon off of each other and just play what's popular more so than in other games, which isn't even necessarily bad.
I don't know about that. I think it's a pretty standard thing across most card games. Like you'll see it in Magic, you'll see it in Hearthstone. Eternal, like most card games will have that. If you want to be competitive, you play the decks that everyone is playing at the top end. So that's how metas are formed themselves. You'll see that kind of thing happen.
That's absolutely true. I guess I just feel like there's fewer people experimenting but maybe that has to do with the smaller community as well.
No. And I was actually Strom already answered the question I was about to ask. I wanted to flip that last question. So we talked about what we like about the Gwent community, but what would we like to see changed? Like, what would we as a community like to... What can we improve on?
No, I think it's good as it is, right? I mean, the community is, what means improving? I mean, the Gwent community also grows from within, right? Which means it's also the identity of the game. And this is also why I think the Gwent community is actually taking the game more seriously and is also kind of, let's say, a little bit older, simply because that's also what the game represents. Yeah, so it's not a game with funky colors and just making it as easy as possible, and and basically as something you should do as a side project. But it's really indulging into this world, having all this serious stuff, and it's and also of course CDPR, which is also taking this not as some kind of work project, but really, living for it. And you can feel that if you play Gwent, or if you play Witcher 3, for example, you can see that people working on this game weren't just working on it, but really living it.
No, definitely, it's been one of the. I sets a new standard, I think, for developers in my mind, because cannot think of any other developer that is willing to go out and do this. And I didn't realize like people just be, oh, he's white knighting CDPR. And I'm like, I don't care if I am or not. Like they've genuinely impressed me with how they've handled the community, how they've handled, going out and being out there and talking with people, and they've been very open about it. Well, so speaking of that growth a little bit, speaking of, we've talked about the esports side of things, and I'm wondering, I'm going to try and steal some more free advice out of your life coach for us. What do you think that what organizations can do to help promote, like a friendly competition spirit, a friendly, more positive growth as we go on. What can organizations like us, like Reddit, like the official Discord, what can we do to help guide this community in the direction that we're already going, I think, in a pretty good direction, but what can we do to further this?
I mean, basically, I don't know, because again, like everything grows organic, right? Which means it's kind of a snowball effect. The game is cool, and cool people playing the game saying, okay, we promote this game for free because it's a cool game. Yeah, and as such, they're carrying the message, and it's that's how it should be.
Oh, fair enough. And speaking of those community-driven events, so I believe that earlier this year you did you put out the call, and you're trying to do a Gwent get-together meetup thing. Are you planning on doing that? Could you talk to us a little bit about what your plans for that are?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's in work, in progress, and also thinking about it myself, how to set up it the best, but also, of course, in cooperation with CDPR, because I actually want to, from the beginning, basically align that with, we're together. So, because otherwise it's like us doing our thing, and then maybe that's not really compatible, and then there's an effort to come together again. So we are doing it, in cooperation from the beginning, or at least talking with each other how that might look like. And I guess I will let you know more within the next weeks/month. Yeah.
No, definitely looking forward to it. I'm always as I said, it's the thing I really liked about the Gwent community is that from the get-go, we've always had tournaments and community events, and we still have those. And I'm going to shamelessly plug our TGO is again this weekend, if you are just tuning in and haven't signed up yet. Passiflora just concluded this past weekend. There's always the Sunday Good Gaming tournaments, and Monday Bowstring Teaching Cup, Tuesday TCG Weekly tournaments. Like, there's all this stuff going on community-wise, and it's really awesome to see, and it's something that I hope continues going. And actually, just 2 days ago, right? Days. On the 4th, we, Team Gwentlemen versus the French community, we lost. But you can watch the VODs of that if you are so inclined. And the Swim, I know you had a pretty fun time casting, I hear.
Oh, no, I had a blast.
So I'm just gonna switch from being a competitive player to just being a caster full time from now on.
Yeah, I'm no
Washed up.
longer going to be a competitive player.
All right. Well, with that, did any of you have any other topics that you really wanted to bring up before we turn this over to the masses?
He's deep in thought.
Yeah. Are you not? You don't have anything?
Oh no, Dale covered all I wanted. I had to find out Lifecoach's favorite premium. Now I can go play that in ranked and win some points back.
Yeah. No, that was good. Don't worry. If I think of anything, I'll pretend a viewer said it and bring it up during viewer questions.
All right. Well, speaking of viewer questions, we're going to go ahead and open up the floor. So if you guys have anything that you'd like to ask us, ask Lifecoach directly, any points of discussion, just throw in at Gwentlemen, and we'll go ahead and we'll answer what we can.
Okay, so while we wait, Lifecoach, this is like my thing that I do while we wait. What's the most ridiculous play you've done or had done to you in Gwent the last week?
The last week? Okay. I think there wasn't that specifically, amazing situations. I think there was one game which I had today where a global top 10 player ended up messing it up and playing like 3 cards, like 3 cards overlay in round 1, which then resulted in 3 card advantage going into round 2, which is something which you rarely see. And it was kind of funny because he messed some interaction up, and then he was so confused that he played another card, messing up the interaction again, exactly yeah, it was weird because like he hit exactly break even again. So yeah, neutralizing it and then got damaged by the weather again, and yeah, that was kind of. But I guess nothing spectacular. No.
Mine personally was seeing someone Milva me today. I didn't think that card still existed in Gwent, but it actually was like a plus 60 point Milva because I had a 60 some point Emperor Brigade. Did not end well for me.
Hard removal meta, baby.
God.
Yeah, but the problem with Milva is in order to be able to play Milva, you have to play Skoyate.
And there's the problem.
There it is.
And
okay, Dale, what do we got so far, Dale?
All right, with that, let's go ahead and open up for. So our first viewer question is, what do we think about factions' abilities? Should they bring them back?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Sorry, I missed it. Was the question to me or?
Oh, it's to everybody.
Just in general.
It's just the top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually like them. I think faction abilities were like giving the factions how to say a little bit of a flavor, and I think taking away the passives definitely took away some of this flavor. But I don't know whether it was a good thing or not. I mean, taking away the flavor was definitely a bad thing, but I'm not sure whether it was a good thing in terms of development. Yeah. So.
Yeah. It was definitely very flavorful. And one other thing is that, I mean, I've noticed that like round 2 has become even less of a played for thing in many cases. Like there's more instant passing on round 2, and part of that is probably to do with the Squirtle and the monsters faction passives no longer being there, because Squirtle you typically want to bleed them out, monsters typically you want to go deep and get your carryover, and it does feel like without the faction passives we're losing a bit of the more kind of nuanced and varied round play in a way. But at the same time, I feel like that can be the faction passives did add a lot of complexity to the game, but I guess I'm in the boat where I feel like that complexity can be added back in ways that are more able to be like fine-tuned and balanced, I guess. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, everyone still has it, right? Because we all have Nilfgaards now.
Yeah.
I'm always gonna complain because I lost monsters passive, and I love that faction. I love that passive. So I was one of the people who was against removing them entirely. I felt like Scoia'tael and Northern Realms were both problematic and needed removed entirely and reworked, but I liked the other ones in general. I'm glad that Nilfgaard still exists. The Skellige one still existing can cause problems in some ways, but I actually preferred it the way it used to be because I like things like buffing Roach and doing it with neutrals. I thought that was really cool. I like Lifecoach said, I thought it added complexity to the game. I get why they removed it because it doesn't work very well down the line with like joining other leaders. It doesn't really. They wanted something that would interact with everything in the faction. You just can't do that with the faction passive. But I liked them, so I don't think they'll come back. But I really hope that in some way we'll see, like at least spiritually, the other faction passives come back in some way.
I would not mind seeing them come back because I agree they added a lot of flavor to the factions. Like it was something cool. Like the faction did this with all of its things. It kind of helped out in that regard, but. I would like to see, like, I don't want to see Nilfgaard passive go back to the way it was, and like, no, like, I really like having the extra mulligan on everybody. But maybe something new, like, just introduce completely brand new faction passives for every faction, and see how that goes. I know I know why they removed it because it was definitely a balancing nightmare. But maybe. Learn from it and come up with something neat, something small that you don't have to really worry about balancing the game around, and that adds a little bit of flavor back. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree with what you guys are saying. I do actually agree with Vishra that the monsters was my favorite from a design standpoint. It did add a lot of nuance, even though I think it was like, really, really powerful.
All right, well, our next question is for Lifecoach specifically. What are your thoughts on the coin flip?
God damn it.
Yeah, I think it's... I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I guess it's somewhere about... if you won the coin flip, you win like around 60% of the games. And I guess that's pretty roughly the amount of games you win. And that's obviously way too high. I mean, that there's no doubt about that. This is... yeah, that this is not a good thing and should definitely get handled one way or the other. Yeah, there are many suggestions. I liked that you have actually a bidding potential or possibility, so that you're basically bidding points on whoever goes first. And yeah, so yeah, basically the one who bids higher. So for example, one bids 5 points, the other one says, hey, it's worth 6 points for me. Then the one with 6 points gets to start second, but the one going first already starts with 6 point advantage. And I don't know whether that's the best idea, but I found that the coolest idea. And because it also involves skill at the beginning of the game and basically completely removes the coin flip randomness. But I'm sure there are also other possibilities, but that there has to be done something about it is pretty certain, I think.
Now,
absolutely.
with your solution, though, you thought Siri was bad in the last meta. Wait until you see Siri in a meta like that. That would be horrific.
Oh, and that's the thing with any game, though, is you're just like, man, this sounds like it'd be a good idea, and somebody's like, what about this? It's like, oh, crap, that's not supposed to interact that way. But no, I agree, like, something to remove the randomness off the coin flip would be kind of neat. Like, any way of doing that, I think, would be really cool, where it's just like, hey, there's just another way of reducing and adding consistency to the game. So that'd be really, really cool.
Okay, here's a good one. Do you think the absence of a mana mechanic makes deck building more difficult when compared to other games with mana like Hearthstone or Magic? If so, do you think that extreme net decking might be a result of people not fundamentally, being used to that system?
Which system was it? With
no mana.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no mana.
Yeah, no mana.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with. It's a good thing for the game, and it does nothing with net decking because people would still net deck anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's just something different, right? So
yeah.
You don't put mana in comparison or in relation to what the card does, but you basically can just take the raw stats. Maybe it's even easier. I don't know.
Maybe.
It gives
but
you,
at the same time.
I feel like from a deck building perspective, it does make it easier to deck build, but it's more of from the gameplay perspective that it really changes things up, because it's what ordering of your decisions you're going to be doing. All right, well, here's our next one. So, what do we think of? Oh man, this is all right. What do we think about implementing a few cards, probably silvers, with a trading/attacking tag, so it hits a opposite unit and decides result based on strength difference? What do we think about adding minion combat to Gwent?
How is that any different than units who already have that interact with the board when you play them? Like, it gives you the strength back? Like, we already kind of...
I think
I don't know.
So maybe it'd be kind of a cool as a silver card. Like, let's say it's a silver card that is like a 12 or something. It's overstated for a silver card, but it requires a unit to be played on the opposite side, and whenever it does, like if the unit's at an 8, then it removes that unit, and 12 would be too high. I don't know. It's kind of weird to think of it that way.
Kind of like Spear Tip a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
You could have something like that, like some kind of enemy that attacks an opponent unit when it's on the end. Something like that. I mean, it depends on the fine details, of course, but something kind of Spear Tippy could work.
Yeah.
I think there's a bunch of design space that they have open to them. It's almost limitless right now what they can do, right? Since the game is so new and we have such basic mechanics. Spear Tip is one of the few cards like that have that like very complex design space right now. And we've even seen that be limited a bit because of how complex it was before. But I think that they can do pretty much anything they want going forward. And I think we'll see a lot of really interesting mechanics down the line.
Yeah, they was putting out that Elias is an example of something similar to that, because Elias kind of makes your unit attack another unit and hit itself to hit the opponent for that much. I'd like to see something like that, though. Definitely, if it's done properly. It's tricky to work with.
Oh, here we go. Our next viewer question dealing with tournament formats: Conquest / Last Hero Standing or Strike format. And I think I already know myself and Swim's answer to this one.
Strike.
Let's see. Lifecoach,
I don't know,
for your tournaments formatting, which of the three, which do you prefer? Conquest, Last Hero Standing, or Strike?
Yeah, I think Conquest is kind of nice, right? Because I mean, this is like the usual debate about Conquest or Last Hero Standing, right? And I think both formats do have their their upsides and downsides. I think Strike generally is again, also has upsides and downsides, but it's probably not the easiest to transmit to viewership to the viewers. Sure. So as such, I think that's probably the weakest of these three possibilities.
I am gonna go with none of the above. I don't think that we've found the right format yet for Gwent. Honestly, like I don't think that Conquest and Last Year Standing were ever the right formats for Hearthstone either. To be quite honest, I think they're the ones that people latched onto early, and they were the ones that stuck. Like there's always been issues competitively with both Conquest and Last Year Standing. Last Year Standing was god awful at the start of Hearthstone, but I think that Gwent is such a unique game that I think that trying to pigeonhole it into a format made for other games doesn't really work properly. I think that one thing that we've done with the Gwentlemen Open so far is you've experimented, I think, with every single month so far, that at least when I've played, every month has had at least something different with the structure for it, and I think it's something that the community run events should keep doing, honestly. Even the Challenger series was a completely different format than anything anyone else was running at the time. So I think that Gwent, I think we need to keep experimenting and see if there's something better out there for Gwent, because I think that the game warrants it.
Oh, definitely agree with you there. On Gwent, I'd like to see something that really satisfies both camps, because I think whenever you go with tournaments, it's always, you know, what is best for the player's skill level versus what's best for the audience, and you know, there's ways of presenting everything, but I'd really like to hit that happy medium with Gwent, and we'll see if right now I'm leaning kind of heavily towards Strike, because that seems to,
yeah. I feel like it depends how it's handled. I feel like a Strike format that treats the ban phase as like just part of the spectator is very similar to how the pick and ban phase in something like Dota or League works. I think something like that could be very, very good for viewership personally, but at the same time it might be a little ambitious. Maybe. Oopsies. Uh-oh.
I think we lost Vishra.
Happening again. Oh, okay. Oh, there he is.
But guys, I take also this opportunity to say goodbye for this evening, because I'm like super tired and also a little bit ill. So I say bye-bye to you guys. And thanks very much for having me.
Thank you very much for
cool.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, Lifecoach.
I'm back and he's gone. Sorry about that, guys.
Just happened had to do that, didn't you?
And then there were three.
And then there were three. No, he did mention that was gonna have to happen. So unfortunately, first off, thank you very much, Lifecoach. In case you're watching this VOD, we definitely appreciate him coming back for coming for this long as he did. It is time zones kind of mess with things, because for me it is just a nice casual 5:10 p.m. But I know over in Europe it's just after midnight, and I think Vishra, not even 6 a.m.
6 a.m. 6:10 right now, actually. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful experience, I tell you what.
All right, well, our
I got worse. Apparently, according to the chat, I got worse hair suddenly. I'm sorry, chat. Oh yeah, I'm right now I am half swim, half life coach, and swim you're now me, and Dale just stays in his corner apparently.
Oh yeah, no,
I'll do it you.
I do my thing. All right, guys, give me just a moment.
I don't have any glasses. Hang on, no. Here we go.
Oh God.
All right, guys, if you could give me just a moment to switch things over webcam-wise so that we can all be on.
Chat's right. I do have worse-looking hair now. Not gonna lie. You know that some of those look like if you've ever seen like suntan, not suntan, like those what do they call them? When you go and you lay in the booth to get suntan in the tanning beds, you look like you have those on.
Yeah. I could see it.
All right, well, while we got this going, so our next viewer question that we had, let's go ahead and do that. But how can new players rise up to successfully compete at tournaments when they do not have well-established practice groups that older high-level players have?
Well, I mean, in terms of like, if you're able to like play at a high rank on ladder and just kind of learn. No. Well, if you're able to learn your decks, and again, this is gonna depend on the format, of course. The question heavily depends on the format in question. But if you're able to learn 2 or 3 decks very, very well, and you have them down, and you can reach a high rank with those decks, in terms of like practice groups or anything, you're not going to be held back that much. In terms of like super big tournaments that like everyone's like incredibly super tryharding for, yeah, it's something like a practice group is really going to help. But for the most part, that has more to do with deck building and being able to come up with like the best roster of decks to bring, more than anything else, I think.
All right, we've got.
I'd agree. I mean,
webcams.
one of the things for me back when I first started playing Gwent was I didn't really know anyone in the community or anything like that, and I just started playing the ladder. I think I was around top 500 when I did the first Gwentlemen Open that I did, and then after that was the Invitational and then Challenger. And once you start to play at a high level, you start to get introduced to new people. You get to get introduced to the higher level players, and you start to meet them on the ladder. But since we don't have a chat function within Gwent yet, we have to actually go ahead and like reach out outside of the actual platform itself, unfortunately. Maybe once we actually have chat, we can do that, but for now we don't have it.
All right. I think we've got the webcam stuff figured out now. And we are back on this. Oh.
Lifecoach is now a CDPR dev, guys.
Yep.
Heard it here first. Lurtz is confirming in chat for us.
Oh man, but yeah, I think it is important to have that support group whenever you're having any time. You're trying to practice for a tournament. You want to have a practice buddy, and I think that. I mean, I'll plug it again, but the official Gwent Discord is a good way of meeting people. You gotta get out there and talk to people, whether it be Reddit, whether it be Discord. Like you've got to find that group of people who you can get along with, and you can create these groups. It's always hard to form any organization, period, from the get-go. So it's just a matter of networking, life skills, guys.
Yeah, like. I don't think anyone can expect to just be brand new to a tournament scene, having never played a game before, and just be invited to practice groups with like a high-end player. It's just not going to happen. That's just not realistic. You need to actually put forth the time and effort, and then once you start to have results, at least in some way, shape, or form, you'll start to then get more recognition and more interaction with those people at the high end.
Okay, so here's a question. Do you think Squirtle will find a place in the meta apart from Dwarf's deck? If not, what are they lacking? Tempo plays, deck thinning, what? I feel like they will, yeah. It might not necessarily be a tier 1 deck, but there's nothing wrong with the Squirtle decks that people were running before. Basically, revolving around comboing a small movement package, and now you've got the Elven Mercs if you can find the room to be able to fit that into that deck, which might be hard figuring out spell slots, but something like a movement Elven Merc package could end up working quite well, for sure. I don't think it would necessarily be it wouldn't be the best way to play the faction. What do you guys think?
I'm gonna have to get a chance to get around and play with it. Oh no! It's supposed to be their patch. Bruiser told me.
I'm sorry. I don't think that they're going to be that good, and I don't think Dwarves is that good, honestly. I think it's one of those situations, kind of like what we used to have in PTRs, where no one would run removal because it was new cards, so everyone wanted to play around with the new things that they thought were super powerful. And then people started to be like, oh, wait, Igni exists, Scorch exists, Thunder exists, etc. So I think Dwarves is kind of one of those things that gets to prey on specific metas, like we talked about earlier, and I think that currently gets to do that for maybe a day or two. Maybe there might be something there with like a control deck with like Shiru and like buffed units like Bran again, maybe. I don't know if there's still something there or not, but like if we need a removal heavy meta, Shrew, Bran, the archers are actually really good for that faction because they do 4 damage instead of just 3, which is really strong. We'll see what the meta develops into, but the archer itself is actually a really key point, I think, and that could be a key bronze in any deck that's actually good.
Yeah, archers can align scorches in really, really effective ways.
I've got our next viewer question. Where'd it go? There we go. Do you think that in-game animation delays or even animations themselves hurt the competitive scene of Gwent, specifically when during chain combos that can take forever? Do we think that some animations should be removed, at least maybe in like ranked mode? See, an animation-free ranked mode.
I have an answer for this. Go back, go to YouTube, type in Hearthstone Patron Warrior, and find a video from like 2014 if you want to see like actual bad animations to take up. That deck could literally take an entire turn, the full 90 seconds, and still not make it through all of its animations. So I think that with the way Gwent works, I think we're totally fine.
Yeah, I basically agree. I don't think that it's a large enough problems. I could, in the future, there are a few animations that could, I guess, be sped up, but nothing that really messes with chaining.
Like even though we have decks and factions, we don't have anything like the old medic chains. We don't really have anything that chains like 10 cards deep in your deck anymore. Like I think the most that I've seen recently is maybe like 5 or 6, and that's off of like novices with emissaries and chains like that. You have a turn timer. Plan your turn out accordingly, and if you rope and you do something wrong, like I do routinely on stream, like Swim does routinely on stream, that's on you as a player. Like it just is what it is. You have a specific time, use it.
Okay.
So, I see it more of a benefit from the streaming perspective because it's going to let like all streamers just be able to just sit there and fully discuss the play in detail, get down to 5 seconds on the clock, and then just go.
That's called BMing your opponent, Dale. Well met. For someone who's against emotes, you seem to enjoy roping.
Actually, I don't rope typically that often. As far as I'm aware.
No, of course, no, neither do I, yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. I think you said you had one, you were questions, Swim. Seemed like you were going that way.
Moi?
Yes.
Oh, I've got all kinds, yeah. If you're a player in the top 200 or so, how do you suggest transitioning into the tournament scene? Well, the easiest way to do it is to just start playing in tournaments. It's as simple as that. Dale was himself pointing out earlier a bunch of tournaments that you can. I mean, there are multiple tournaments every week you can play in right now, and it's just learn by practice would be the biggest thing. And there's additional advice, such as advice is going to depend on the format, but just play towards your decks.
Yeah, I think a lot of tournament. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, every tournament for Gwent is free. Challenger signups are free. Everything like that we've ever had tournament-wise has been free. The only thing that has been anything that you couldn't enter was the invitational that we ran, and presumably like maybe future events are things that might be invitation only. So enter tournaments, play them, practice. It's a little bit difficult trying to learn how to do things like tournament setups, like deck preparation for tournaments, or like figuring out like pick order. But that's not something that you can really read a guide on and understand a lot of times. Like you can get the general basis for it just looking online for like anything with Conquest, whatever the format basically is, Conquest, Last Hero Standing, Strike, etc. It's something you have to play and actually do to gain knowledge on it. So just start playing at the beginning. Yeah,
that's basically exactly what I was going to say. Like tournaments, the easiest way to get into them and like practice for them is to just do them. And as I've mentioned before, there's tons of tournaments going on all the time, and the more you practice and participate in them, the better off you're going to get in them. And it's such a different feeling from playing casuals. It's a different feeling from playing ranked. It's you're playing in a tournament, and it's got tournament metas that develop specifically because it's a tournament format, and that really largely depends on the format of the tournament, whether it be Conquest, whether it be Last Hero Standing, whether it be Strike. But the more you just get a chance to experience it, the better you're going to get at them overall.
Okay, I've got a viewer question here.
Ooh.
What do you think of adding additional spies like Thaler or Cantarella to the game?
Just more spies for like that
spies
specifically that type of spy?
Those as in card advantage spies.
Like how Skellige used to have 3 of them?
We don't talk about those days. First off,
Hey, well, were you even playing when they had 3, or did you start when they had 2?
I was playing with the patch where they made it to 2.
Ah, yeah.
I think I am
You
pretty.
you didn't experience the triple spy then.
Ugh.
No, but those are dark days. 'Cause it was dark days with 2 of them. Thank you very much.
I am
Plus
perfectly
then we realized
content with each faction having one spy that's able to do that. Because that was one of the big changes from Witcher 3 version of Gwent going to the standalone. Was it was a spy game. It was all about the card advantage, which is all about drawing through the whole deck and playing spy after spy after spy after spy. And we saw a little bit of that old decoy. Ugh. But like it's. I am happy with the level that it's at, and I wouldn't add. I would personally not add any more that do that.
I think that the issue with spies is that when one faction is more than the others, it inherently has the best card advantage in the game, and when one deck has better card advantage than other decks, then there's an inherent imbalance there where they can then take over the game if they ever get tools that are enough to be able to push an early round. So like one thing we see with spies with like if you look at Skellige, right? Skellige would push round 1 really deep, regain that card advantage round 2 with Okvis, Siri, double or triple spies, and then have card advantage in round 3 and then win that way.
Yeah.
And when you let one faction have more spies than other factions, it creates an imbalance. So I think that they've learned that you really can't give one faction multiple spies above the other factions, or then they're just better at that point in any way, shape, or form. I think we will see other forms of card advantage, but they'll either be ones that every faction gets access to, or they'll be things that are very specific with their usage that won't make them quite as imbalanced as the current spies are. Like we've learned. Like what was the highest point a spy ever hit? Like Dawn was a 16 or a 15.
15.
And it was still too much with 2 spies in the faction that they could have like you could give your opponent a 15 and get a card out of it. That just says something about the ridiculousness of a spy existing.
Yeah. It has to do ultimately with, I mean, like you said, it comes down to 2 factors: giving card advantage to the same faction that can so easily push someone out of round 1, like old Scoia'tael, for example. Like the Scoia'tael faction passive at the end of closed beta was, I don't think it was inherently a huge problem to the game, but when you combine it with Saskia and Elven Mercenary and those cards that are able to achieve that level of value, it absolutely becomes a problem. Because like once you can guarantee winning round 1, basically, then you can just bleed them out every single time.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. So going into this new patch, how would we all rate the factions in terms of like tiering them? Like what's best, second best, third best?
I guess I'll go first.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's.
What do you think, Vishra?
I'll put monsters first, just because I think that they're the easiest deck. I think they're probably the most stable faction right now.
Yeah,
I think every other faction had enough significant changes that it's hard to actually gauge where they were. I think Nilfgaard was improved, but I don't think you can put them at first, just because it's going to take a little bit to find what the optimal build is for it. So I think it's monsters. Then I think everything is almost equal right below that, actually. And I don't know that's necessarily like a power ranking. I think it's just because monsters is a faction that the changes weren't enough to actually ruin any archetypes. Like the archetypes are still pretty much in place for what they were before. The numbers are tweaked a bit, so you can do a little bit of a difference with the tech options too. But overall, it's still the same decks.
I feel like you see that every patch, it seems, where like these archetypes, these decks have already existed previously, and you get a patch that changes everything up, and people just look through it, and you're just like, all right, that one didn't change. It's still good. We saw that, I think, with like open beta, just beginning of it with Queen's Guards. People are like, okay, we know this is a deck that works, and it doesn't look like it got changed all that much. Let's do Queen's Guards. And then shortly afterwards, it took us maybe a week, 2 weeks, and people start realizing there's all these other decks that can be played. So I think that, I agree with you. Monsters feels like the one that got changed the least right now. So people are like, all right, cool, Monsters, here we go. And we'll see that change drastically probably in a week, 2 weeks.
Like even with the weather changes with the succubus nerf, etc., like the faction is still at its core. You can still play the same decks that you were playing before, and while it will be a lower power level, it's still a deck that interacts and functions and has very good synergy with itself. I think that Skellige as a faction is kind of like what old closed beta Scoia'tael was. If you remember, like, we used to see, like, the faction got gigantically nerfed, and everyone's like, this faction is dead. And then we're like, give it, like, a week and a half, then Scoia'tael will be back on top. And it did that every single time with a different deck. And Skellige's kind of had this trend, and had it through closed beta, too. And I mentioned it earlier. We never really noticed it until, I think, maybe the very end of closed beta with the Croc decks, with the Warcry decks, where it would have different like archetypes every single patch on top, and then they got nerfed. We went through Queensguard multiple times. We went through Discard. We went through Warcry. Since then, we went through the whole Morkvarg buffing with Wild Boar. We've been through multiple Axeman metas. Like, the faction just has so many unique tools to it and so many things that it does that it always finds a way to work. And even though it might not, I think it's probably the worst faction right now, just because of the sheer amount of nerfs that they had. I think that going forward, we'll see them be probably one of the better factions yet again. It is what it is.
Yeah, they still have tools.
Yep. Speaking of, I missed the old discard deck. Just need to plug that. Burza, do your magic. Give it back.
Was that with or without the Warlong ships?
Oh no, I am talking the old one, like the cancerous Warlong chips, the Siri Dashed, whatever she used to be. Full-worn cancer. Give me everything, man.
Okay. Here's a question. Do you think they will buff or reverse any weather changes? I personally don't expect them to. Now, there was a lot of outcry right when these were hitting, of course, based around these weather changes. Everyone was like, "Oh, they're nerfing weather too much," but as we see, they're still basically fine. It was mostly just people overreacting. Like, weather still ends up being strong, although the biggest thing about the new weather is that it's more tied to basically synergy cards, like we were saying before, cards that tutor out weathers, or cards that have other synergy with them, like Foglets. And I think it's in a perfect spot given that. It's too hard to balance otherwise. What do you guys think?
I think the days of seeing someone just vanilla play a Rain or a Frost or a Fog are probably over. It's not good enough. Just like to play as itself. Like, the days of Spellateller are gone the way we've seen it in the last meta, right? It just doesn't exist the way it did, because you can't afford to play cards that do 2 points a turn and take a full round, because they don't do any tempo play when you play them, and they don't give you enough now, since they can't make levels like they used to, that can't work that way anymore. What we will see a lot of, though, I think, and I think that CDPR has kind of like hinted at this with their recent card design with Wild Hunthound and with Aretuza Adept, is that they like tying weather effects to cards, because then you can kind of modulate the power of the weather effect by the card strength. So like we've seen Wild Hunthound get a point nerf along with the weather change. We've seen Karanther had its numbers change multiple times. We've seen Aretuza Adept get a buff because it was too weak. So if you do that, then you can have a weaker weather effect exist in the game, and you can leave it underpowered by attaching points to the weather effect. So I think that's a really good idea. I think it lets them then in the future be a bit more experimental with weather. You can do things that are positive weather effects, and then you can nerf the body it's attached to, and you can make other like negative weather effects too. So I think I doubt we'll see them ever buff the weathers again back to what they were before. I don't think we'll ever see the gold weathers hit 3 points again. We won't see any of the bronze weathers go back to doing the whole row or anything like that, but we might see a couple of changes just in terms of like average, like holding the power level where it is.
Yeah, I mean, weather is something that, this might sound kind of funny, but it kind of naturally balances itself, or at least it should. It's supposed to.
It should. Because, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It hasn't.
It didn't last patch, because last patch it was simply too strong. But in terms of a fine tuning of the balance of weather, it does. It is a mechanic that inherently naturally balances itself. Because of course, as it becomes a little bit weaker, people run through clears, and it obviously I'm not saying that it's not like an infinite loop or anything like that. But
it is actually. Like over time, it's like a wave. It's like with Queensguard are, right? With their buff nerf cycle, it's a wave. Like there's a high point, and then you run counters, and then it hits a low point, then it goes back up.
It'll stabilize. But it's a naturally stabilizing mechanic, basically, which means that if they nerf it a little bit, it still manages to have a presence. Like, weather kind of can't not exist in this game, even if they decided to nerf it a little bit more, unless they add clears that are cards, unless they add clears as an option to cards that are already run anyway, which the mages aren't necessarily at anymore. It's very close with them. But even then, you don't want to commit them to clearing a single weather. So I think it ends up being perfectly fine.
You know, I'd make the argument actually that the most bounds we've ever had for that, where it's self-regulating, was actually closed beta. Because you could run decks that were weather-based that when there wasn't clears would be good, and then if there were clears would get destroyed. Like the weather deck that we took to Challenger is a deck like that. Like there were plenty of decks through closed beta where the weather effects, like that time period of closed beta, where if clear skies existed, weather didn't see play. Like if it saw play across multiple factions, and then if it was only Scoia'tael playing it to get the rally effect, weather was actually a very good deck. So like we saw that in closed beta. The issue was that it was just too high of a point total that it gave, and I don't think it's really translated over. I don't think that equilibrium is right in open beta and hasn't been yet. I think they're hoping that they have it now. That's on that right equilibrium when that's like all settled out, but I don't think that they found it yet.
No, I think that ideally we get to that point where it is that self-regulating, and I agree, like the closed beta was probably the closest we've been, but we did see such a drastic change going from closed beta to open beta, which I think we can all agree was a step in the right direction. So it's baby steps on getting us to that point where it does get that fully self-regulating again. I'm hoping that the changes to weather this patch, that it'll be a further step in the right direction.
Well, here's one. Do you think gold weather is playable, and which tier are they? I'm assuming that person means in our keg tier list of cards. Dale, what do you think?
I think
very playable.
Yeah, I think
Your name's not Dale, Swim.
Sorry. Well, he was just he looked like he wanted to come back to him.
Come on, I can have my time where my cogs are spinning.
Okay. No. Dale, what do you think about the gold weathers?
I think that they are playable. I would personally wait a little bit just to see how much people like. We were talking about this balance, this equilibrium. See how much people ease off of the clear weathers, and if they do, start throwing them in, because it's going to. That's where you're going to get the most benefit from them, is in a meta where that shifts, where people are like, oh, no, weather sucks, so no one's going to play weather anymore. And then you're like, oh, well, hey, here's these things to have fun with. So I would personally wait. I would rank them probably, I don't know, fairly highly in the 70s for now, with a potential to 80s. As a standalone card, as far as Keg Helper is concerned, you know, it's a solid gold card. It's not going to give you a body, and it does have something that can answer it. But it's a solid card right now. Definitely not top tier, definitely not bottom tier, but it definitely has the potential given the right metas, and I think that it could be pretty darn good right now, depending on how much people ease off of the weather.
Yeah. No, I basically completely agree. I would, in terms of the keg picker, I would put them probably high 70s. Probably recommend it. Not like a top tier, but it's neutral. And they're kind of, again, going back to what I was saying about weather being naturally balancing, there are always going to be metas found where they will have a huge surprise value. And these cards are kind of all about getting that surprise value off. Yeah, and they'll always be good if they do.
Yeah. I think that they're still, like, I think everyone's kind of like looked at them since the nerf, I guess 2 patches ago now, and kind of wrote them off. I think that when no one runs weather clears, those cards will still win you a round guaranteed, like almost guaranteed. Like that card is one that, like, you slam it and your opponent looks at their hand and they say, oh, well, I have no clear skies. I guess this round is probably over. The one caveat that I would say exists right now is that because of the Elven Mercenary change, so it's now a loyal unit, Elven Mercenary is probably back to being a staple card in most Scoia'tael decks, unfortunately. Which means that we'll see a lot more clear skies in that faction specifically. So if Scoia'tael does wind up existing as a very high level deck, I'd expect to see Elven Mercenaries in it, which means clear skies, which means R&R and Drought are just effectively worse right off the bat. If that faction doesn't see high level play, I think R&R and Drought are perfectly acceptable in any competitive deck at that point, and will probably be decent too at that point. So probably like low 80s. I think I'd rate them a little bit higher than you two, but with the caveat that if Scoia'tael is good, they're worse.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay.
Speaking of, I'm unhappy with that buff, actually, thinking about it now.
The Elven Mercenary buff.
I forgot how much I hated Merc Chains.
I honestly, I don't expect them to be as good as I don't think they're going to be auto included. Honestly, I'm not sure, but at 2 strength and in a meta where you're not necessarily going to be able to get as much value out of the modality of being able to choose options. Being forced to run spells can be kind of awkward. We'll see.
Yeah, because it's been such a downside for you to be able to just be like, here, look at my Thunderbolt potion for 14 points.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, obviously, dwarfs are auto-included. Absolutely, they're ridiculous. Okay, so here's a. Oh. You know, no.
Oh,
go ahead, Dale. No, I insist.
Thank you. Here's probably the same one you were looking at. What's our opinion about CDPR making units agile? Should units have a preferred row? So agile units, and maybe having units have a preferred row that, like, if you place them on the row that they like, you get a buff on that unit somehow.
I basically love that idea. I mean, there's kind of this ongoing debate about, whether more agility or less agility is good for the game, and there's people on both sides. But in terms of finding the right middle ground, I think it's perfect. It gives more options. You can do a lot more nuanced things, but at the same time, you're keeping the flavor, and you're keeping, the actual kind of identity, even, of just having these units prefer a specific row.
I am firmly in the I hate agility camp.
Wow.
I think that it removes a lot of the cards' identities in the game. I think that it causes a lot of balance issues with cards in the game specifically too. If you look back, the classic one that I still use as an example for this is if you look at closed beta, the Siri-Squaretail deck at the time. One of the biggest issues with that deck was the fact that almost every bronze unit in that deck was agile, and it could just basically always ignore weather on rows to stop it, right? Because Blue Mountain Commanders were still agile and Elven Mercenaries were agile at the time.
Yeah.
So what you have when you have a deck that has agile units, it basically lets you play around board effects, whether it's weather effects, whether it's removal things like Igni that require specific functionality to actually do something. There's a lot of things that being able to have agility stop you from being able to do. And I also think that from both a flavor standpoint and from a deck building standpoint, I don't like removing that from the game. I think that row locking cards is important for answers, for card identity, and just in general to the game. I don't think that you have this game that's based around this board of 3 rows, right? If you remove the ability to be stuck to a row, what's the point of having rows then? Like it feels weird to me, right? I don't know. I don't like it.
See, I am firmly in the camp that I would be very happy if every single unit was agile. It was something that really struck me as odd going from closed beta to open beta, because I mean we had this is supposed to be on this row, and it was it really did add to like the row aspect of things. But I see it more like it feels like the natural progression of the positioning system, because like you can position units, woohoo, like everything was going to the right on a row, and now you can move it to the left if you want it to, or put it in between units. And now I'm not only able to decide right or left, but I'm able to decide, which row I want to go in. And I'd like to see something, like the question is suggested, like maybe a preferred row, so like maybe if I play it on the melee row, it gets like a Quinn's Shield or something. Some cool buff like that, but I really liked it. Was something that I did not think I was going to like going from closed beta, but I really do like the moving on all the rows, because it does let you play around things like weather. It's still, when we look at this last patch, the one right before us, with this hotfix, and we were complaining about how good weather is, it was still good even when everything's able to move all over the place. So it's a way of playing around it, but you're still going to get hit by it.
Yeah,
I felt like it. There were decks at the time, like row stacking too back in the day, that like it was both a good and a bad thing. Like Swim, like back when Swim first made Dwarfs as a deck, like people wouldn't actually play specific cards because they weren't melee, and then you would start, because people were hacking so hard against it, you would play non-melee Euro cards in the deck to specifically counter that hate. And I think that's a really good thing to have, and I think it's an extra level to the game, and I don't like removing that. Like I just don't. I think that it's also like it's so much hidden power that people don't really respect, and I don't like giving it to everything in the game. But that's just me. I can see the other side of the argument too.
Yeah. No, I mean I'm just Dale described my experiences personally as well. Like going into it, adding agility to so many units, especially the gold ones for me. It felt even weirder on the gold ones. You put anything anywhere, it felt very, very strange, very alien. You have to. It felt kind of purposeless. It felt like, what's the point? But honestly, I really wouldn't go back. And I think so. Vishra, you do at the same time bring up a really good point about feeling like, yeah, a large part of the design is these 3 rows, and there should be incentives to play things on different rows. I do at the same time completely agree with that, and that's kind of why I like this marriage of having certain units gain power on certain rows. Now it could be significant. I could see it being something along the lines of like 2 points. I'm not sure. Obviously, things would be rebalanced towards it. If anything, it would be closer to a unit can be played agile for 2 less points or something like that. That's how it would balance out to currently. But something, if they were to incentivize it in the right way, if they were to give incentives towards putting things on specific rows or give those rows back their identity in a small way, then I definitely am in favor of more agility.
All right.
It's definitely a very poignant topic these days.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's it's topical. Everyone's talking about agility. It's kind of the flavor of the week topic.
And like it makes it easy on my perspective. We're just like, all right, what are people talking about? This? Let's talk about that. But no, so well, we had Lifecoach had to, for anyone just tuning in, Lifecoach had to leave just a little bit earlier. I know he's getting tired and wants some sleep, and I cannot blame him. So I think we'll probably head on in his lead, and a little bit shorter of a talk show for you guys today as well. So we'll go ahead and wrap things up here.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Swim, any closing statements, any shout-outs?
Closing statements. Yeah, I'd love to give a shout out to my lovely girlfriend. She's off camera, but she's real. She exists. And you can hear her all the time.
I need to see her sticking an arm into the camera frame, and then we'll believe you. Swim on stream live right now in front of 1,500 viewers.
Right now.
Yeah, just have her stand up, come over, stick her arm in front of your face on the camera where you can all see it, and then walk away.
I don't think she wants to do that. No.
Will she show a hand? How many fingers can we get? Can we get 4 fingers?
Okay, she's not real. You got me.
Yes.
Vishra, any shout-outs, any closing statements?
Everyone come play TGO this weekend. It's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. It's a new meta, so it's going to be great for both deck builders, for players. You'll see a lot of unique stuff that you won't see at any other tournament, any other time of the month, except for immediately following a patch date. We've been getting really lucky, actually. I think with that, we've had 2 out of our last 3 TGOs actually have been like the week after a patch. It's a really refreshing way to play a tournament if you haven't done it before. A bunch of us will be streaming this. If you're not going to actually play it, be sure to watch all of us who are streaming it on Twitch. Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna go sleep after this.
Wait, no, it's wake up time for you.
It's 6:45 a.m., so I've been awake since 10 p.m.
No, I'm gonna go to sleep after this.
Well, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to the people who are running these tournaments, us included. Yes, go Gwentlemen. Now, Passiflora tournament, Gwentlemen's Open, the Good Gaming tournaments every Sunday, Bowstring Tension Cups every Monday, and TCG Weekly Esports every Tuesday. I really like seeing the community rise up and do these, help the tournament scene. So shoutouts there. Shoutouts to the official Gwent Reddit from the official. It's just gwent.reddit.com. From there, you can also find links to the official Gwent Discord, where you can chat with your fellow players. And if you're looking to try and form a group to maybe help practice for a TGO this weekend, that's a good place to start. Start networking. Start talking to people. Shout out to, if you're looking for any cool articles, any recordings of past VODs, they're all up on our websites over at gwentlemen.com. And shout out, Guys, shout out to thank you very much for Lifecoach for agreeing to be with us for the talk show today. It was seriously appreciated. And also, final shout out to we all stream. So you can check out Swim over at twitch.tv/swimstream, Vishra over at Vishra90, I believe.
Dude, I just realized it's your birth year. Did you know that? You're born in the same year as the number after your name, Vishra.
And myself
No, seriously,
over at the White
odds?
Wolf, which it's where I'll be after this talk show if you guys want to stick around. But no, thank you very much, everybody who tuned in. We will be back on this channel probably Monday, I'm thinking, sometime during the day. Historically is when we like trying to do these casts, but we'll have a final time for you.
It
tweeted
should
out
in
for
theory
you. Yeah. But we should see you again on this channel on Monday, and definitely on this channel next Thursday for the next Gwentlemen talk show. But thank you very much, everybody, and hope to see you all again next week.
Goodbye.